Talon crept through the thick forest, his small feet barely making a sound on the mossy ground. The trees towered above him, their twisted branches blocking most of the light. He could feel the wind carrying the scent of something strange and wild. It made his heart race. He had heard stories of dragons all his life, massive, fire-breathing creatures that could crush a human with one claw. But he had never seen one up close, and now he was about to. The nest was ahead, hidden in a clearing surrounded by jagged rocks. Smoke drifted from a distant cave, and the air was hot and dry, as if the dragons had already been here. Talon held a small basket tightly in his hands. Inside there were soft cloths to hold the eggs carefully. He had stolen nothing yet, but even being here felt like a crime. He crouched behind a boulder, peeking through the cracks. The nest was enormous, made of blackened wood and strange crystals that glowed faintly. Within it lay several dragon eggs, each one larger than his head. Their shells shimmered in colors he had never seen, red, gold, and deep silver. They pulsed with a quiet warmth, alive with the promise of new life. Talon's stomach twisted. He had come to take one egg for his village. The people were starving. Crops had failed and the animals were too few. The village elders believed that a dragon egg could bring hope, not just for food, but for magic that might heal the land. Talon did not know how, but he had to try. He inched forward, careful not to step on the brittle stones that covered the ground. The eggs called to him in a strange way. Not with words, but with a sense of life, small vibrations he felt through the soles of his feet. He reached the edge of the nest and froze. A shadow passed overhead. Talon looked up and saw them, dragons circling above, their wings beating silently against the sky. They were enormous, their scales reflecting the dim sunlight. Talon's heart pounded in fear. He had no plan if they noticed him. He bent down, reaching for a red-gold egg near the center of the nest. The moment his fingers brushed the smooth surface, a deep growl echoed through the clearing. Talon froze, too terrified to move. The growl grew louder, vibrating through his chest. From the center of the nest, a massive dragon rose. She was taller than any building in the village, her scales a shining silver blue, eyes glowing like molten light. Her wings stretched wide, casting shadows over the nest, and her claws dug into the earth. This was the Queen Silvara. The air around her vibrated with power and authority. Talon's knees trembled. He had expected dragons to be fierce, but not this intelligent. Not this aware. Silvara's eyes locked on him, and it felt as if she could see every thought in his head. "Please," Talon whispered, though he doubted she could hear him. "I mean no harm. I only want one egg." The queen did not move. She lowered her massive head, her nostrils flaring, studying him. Talon held his breath. The other dragons above circled more tightly, their wings beating the air with menace. The forest seemed to hold its breath too. He tried to explain in his mind, hoping somehow she could understand. "We are hungry. My village is dying. I only want to save them." Silvara tilted her head. Her eyes glimmered, and Talon could feel a vibration in the ground. It was not anger. It was curiosity. She stepped closer, her claws cracking the rocks beneath her weight. Talon froze, too terrified to move. He noticed now the other eggs. Each one pulsed with light, but the red gold egg in his hands was the brightest. It seemed to recognize him, quivering slightly in response to his touch. The queen's eyes softened just a little and her growl lowered in tone. Talon swallowed hard. "I'll take care of it," he whispered. "I promise. I won't hurt it." The queen's tail flicked, stirring leaves and debris. She moved closer, circling him slowly. Every instinct told Talon to run, but he couldn't. He had come too far. He could feel the pulse of the egg, faint but steady, and it gave him courage. Silvara lowered her head near the egg, inspecting it closely. Talon stepped back slightly, giving her space. The queen's glowing eyes scanned his face. It was a silent test. She sniffed the air, her gaze intense, and Talon felt like she was judging every part of him. His fear, his courage, his intentions. Finally, the queen did something unexpected. She lowered her massive head and nudged the egg gently with her snout. Talon flinched. He did not know if it was approval or warning. The vibrations from her movements made the egg tremble in his hands. Talon whispered again, "Please? I only want to save it." The queen paused. Her glowing eyes studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she lowered herself to the ground, curling around the nest in a protective circle. It was not a gesture of anger. It was a gesture of watching, of deciding. Talon's heart raced. He had survived the first challenge. The queen had not attacked. She had not called her dragons to destroy him. Instead, she was studying him, testing him silently. The forest around them seemed to breathe with tension. The other dragons continued circling above, but their movements were more careful, hesitant. Talon realized that the queen's decision would affect not just him, but all the eggs in the nest. He held the egg closer, feeling its warmth. It seemed to respond to his touch. A tiny pulse of life, so faint he almost missed it. Silvara lowered her head even closer, letting her glowing eyes meet his. Talon could feel a connection forming. Not through words but through understanding. She knew he meant no harm. She could sense the desperation, the hope, and the bravery in this small human. For a moment, everything was still. Only the sound of the wind and the beating wings of distant dragons filled the clearing. Talon's hands shook slightly, but he held the egg tightly. Then, without warning, the queen released a soft vibration, a sound that moved through the ground and the air. Talon felt it in his chest. It was not a growl. It was a message simple and clear. You may try, but your courage will decide your fate. Talon nodded, understanding. He did not know exactly what it meant, but he felt it in his heart. This was his chance. One chance to save the egg, and perhaps save his village. He looked up at the massive queen and whispered, "I will do everything I can. I promise." Silvara's eyes glimmered, just slightly. Then she straightened, wings stretching wide, and watched him carefully. Talon backed away slowly, giving her space but keeping the egg close. He knew the hardest part was still ahead. Taking the egg from the nest without angering her or the other dragons would be the true test. The wind stirred through the clearing again, and the egg pulsed softly, alive and warm. Talon took a deep breath. He was scared. He was small. But he had courage. And for the first time he felt the quiet spark of hope that maybe, even just maybe, he could succeed. The queen's eyes never left him as he stepped toward the edge of the nest. Every heartbeat, every movement mattered. Talon knew that if he failed it would cost more than just the egg. But if he succeeded he might change everything, for the dragons, for his village, and for himself. And in that tense silence, under the watchful eyes of the dragon queen, Talon took his first careful step forward, holding the glowing egg close, ready to face whatever came next. Talon held the egg tightly as he backed away from the queen. Every muscle in his body trembled. He knew one wrong move could make her attack. He had never been so close to a creature so powerful and so intelligent. Silvara, the queen, lowered her massive head to watch him, her glowing eyes never leaving his small figure. He felt her judgment in every vibration of the ground beneath him. He whispered again, "I only want to save it. I promise." The queen shifted slightly, her claws digging into the rocks. The movement sent tiny tremors through the earth. Talon froze, his heart pounding. He wondered if she would let him take the egg or if she would crush him for daring to touch it. For what felt like minutes, neither moved. Then the queen emitted a low, rumbling sound. It was not a growl, not a warning, it was something different. It resonated through Talon's chest. He felt as if she was speaking directly to him, though no words passed her lips. Slowly, Silvara circled him in the egg, her eyes studying every detail. She stopped at a distance, watching him carefully. Talon could feel her analyzing him, testing his courage and his honesty. He held the egg closer, willing it to remain calm under her scrutiny. Finally, the queen lowered her wings slightly, a sign of something Talon did not fully understand. He sensed approval, but he did not dare move. The air felt heavy with tension, as if the forest itself waited for her decision. Talon tried to stay calm. "Please," he said softly, "I will take care of it. I will protect it. I will do whatever is needed." The queen's eyes narrowed slightly, studying him. Then she lifted her massive head and emitted a sound that made the air vibrate. Talon's knees shook. The vibration passed into the egg and he felt it quiver in his hands. It was alive and aware, responding to the queen's command. Talon realized that Silvara was testing not just him but the egg too. She wanted to see if it would recognize him as someone worthy. He whispered gently to it, "It's okay, little one. I won't hurt you." The egg's pulse seemed to steady and Talon felt a small sense of relief. The queen's tail flicked, scattering leaves and debris. She moved closer, circling the nest again, making sure he understood the stakes. Talon's heart raced. He had never been so close to danger and hope at the same time. Finally, Silvara stopped in front of him. Her massive head lowered, almost touching the egg. Talon could feel her warmth, her life force vibrating through the ground. She stared into his eyes and he felt an intense connection. It was as if she could see every thought in his mind and judge every intention in his heart. Talon swallowed hard. "I only want to save it," he said. "I will do everything to protect it. Please let me." The queen's glowing eyes seemed to study him for a long time. Then, slowly, she nudged the egg with her snout. Talon flinched. The egg trembled, but it did not crack. It was alive, safe, and aware. The queen tilted her head and made a soft, low sound. It was not a growl, but more like a question. Talon understood it as a challenge. She was asking if he was ready to accept the responsibility. He nodded quickly. Yes, I am ready. The queen circled him once more, then stepped back. She lowered herself to the ground, curling slightly around the nest. Her wings folded gently, and her eyes softened. Talon could not believe what he saw. She had not attacked. She had not punished him. She was giving him a chance. Talon's heart raced with relief. He looked at the egg, then back at the queen. "Thank you," he whispered. "I won't fail." The queen's eyes glimmered faintly, and she made a low, resonating sound that Talon took as approval. He knew this was not a guarantee of safety, but it was more than he had hoped for. Silvara then stepped aside slightly, allowing him to pick the egg carefully. Talon's hands shook as he lifted it from the nest. It was warm and pulsing with life, a fragile bundle of hope. He felt its heartbeat, a tiny but steady rhythm, and he whispered softly to it. "You are safe now," he said. "I will protect you." The queen's eyes remained on him, and Talon felt her presence like a shadow over him, not threatening but powerful and watchful. He knew that every step he took with the egg would be observed and judged. Talon turned slowly to leave the nest. The other dragons circled above, their wings slicing the air. He could feel their curiosity, their suspicion. But he held the egg tightly and moved carefully. The queen followed him with her gaze, making sure he did not falter. As he stepped through the clearing, Talon realized he had never felt so alive and so scared at the same time. Every movement mattered. Every breath mattered. And every moment was a test of his courage and his promise to the egg. Finally he reached the edge of the nest. He stopped and looked back at Silvara. She lowered her head slightly, a silent gesture of acknowledgement. It was not friendship, not yet, but it was recognition. Talon understood that this was a beginning, not an ending. He whispered softly to the queen, "I will not fail you. I will protect it, and I will learn from you." The queen's eyes glimmered one last time before she turned her massive body and returned to the center of the nest. Talon could feel her presence watching him even from a distance, and he knew she would not forget him or the egg. With the egg held carefully in his arms, Talon began the long journey back to his village. Every step was cautious, but his heart was lighter. He had survived the queen's decision, and for the first time he felt a small spark of hope. The forest seemed different now. Every sound, every movement was alive. Talon felt the weight of responsibility, but also the promise of a new future. The egg in his arms was more than just a life to protect. It was a bridge between two worlds, a fragile hope that humans and dragons could one day understand each other. As he walked, he whispered to the egg again, "We will make it, little one. Together we will survive." And in the quiet of the forest, under the watchful eyes of the Dragon Queen, a bond began to form, a bond that no one had expected, and one that could change the future forever. Talon walked carefully through the dense forest, holding the egg close to his chest. Every rustle of leaves, every crack of a branch made him jump. He could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. This egg was not just any egg, it was alive and it depended entirely on him. Its pulse was faint, but he could feel it, small vibrations that reminded him of the fragile life inside. He found a safe spot near a stream, where the air was cool and the ground soft. He set the egg gently on a bed of moss, making sure it would not roll or tip. Talon knelt beside it, watching its faint glow in the dim light. He whispered softly, "It's okay, little one. I won't leave you. I will protect you." At first nothing happened. The egg lay still, warm but quiet. Talon felt nervous. He had never cared for something so fragile before. But as he continued to speak softly, he noticed the egg pulsing slightly faster, as if responding to his voice. It was a small sign, but it gave him hope. Talon spent the day sitting near the egg, observing the forest around him. Birds chirped in the trees and small creatures moved through the underbrush. He kept one hand lightly resting on the egg, feeling its warmth. Slowly he began to feel a connection, not through words but through touch and presence. The egg seemed to recognize him, and he recognized its life as something precious. That night, Talon built a small shelter with branches and leaves to protect the egg from the cold. He stayed close, keeping watch and whispering to it, telling it stories of his village and his family. He imagined what it would be like when the egg hatched, and he felt a strange bond forming, as if the egg already trusted him. Over the next few days, Talon and the egg became inseparable. He carried it carefully when he had to move, always mindful of its safety. The egg began to pulse more strongly, responding to his voice and gentle touch. Talon realized that this bond was more than care, it was mutual. The egg gave him courage and he gave it protection. One morning as Talon watched the egg, he noticed a small crack forming in the shell. He froze, unsure what to do. The egg trembled in his hands, tiny vibrations running through him. "It's okay," he whispered. "Take your time. I'm here." The crack widened slowly, and a faint chirping sound emerged. Talon's heart raced. He realized that the life inside was struggling to break free. He stayed calm, not moving too quickly, letting the egg hatch at its own pace. Finally, a small head emerged, covered in shiny silver scales. Its eyes blinked open, revealing intelligence and curiosity. Talon gasped. The dragon was tiny, no bigger than his forearm, but its presence was immense. It looked up at him, and for the first time Talon felt the bond fully. The dragon recognized him and he recognized it. He whispered, "Hello, little one. You made it." The dragon chirped softly, nuzzling Talon's hand. Its warmth flowed into him and he realized this creature would trust him completely. Talon felt a joy he had never known. This bond was more than survival, it was life shared between two beings from different worlds. Days passed and the dragon grew stronger. Talon named it Kale. Every day he learned more about its behavior. Kale would follow his hand, respond to his voice, and even try to mimic his movements. The bond deepened, and Talon began to understand that the dragon could sense his feelings and intentions. Talon also realized that caring for Kale was teaching him patience and responsibility. He had to think carefully about every decision: where to sleep, what to eat, and how to keep Kale safe from predators. He discovered that the dragon egg had chosen him for a reason. Silvara's trust was reflected in Kale's acceptance of him. One afternoon, Talon noticed Kale making soft sounds when he approached the nest site where he had first met the queen. He followed the dragon instinctively. When they arrived, Silvara was there, her massive wings folded and her eyes glowing softly. She observed them quietly, making no sudden movements. Kale chirped and nudged Talon as if introducing him to the queen. Talon stepped forward cautiously, keeping the dragon close. The queen tilted her head, her eyes studying them both. Talon felt a deep understanding pass between them. The queen acknowledged the bond, not with words, but with a vibration in the ground that Talon felt through his feet. Talon realized that the bond he shared with Kale was rare and powerful. It was not just about protecting life, it was about respect, trust, and mutual understanding. Even the queen, fierce and proud, could sense it. Talon felt a strange pride, knowing that he and Kale had formed something unique, something that bridged the gap between human and dragon. As Kale grew, Talon taught him basic movements: how to crawl, how to stay hidden, and how to respond to danger. The dragon learned quickly, guided by Talon's careful instructions and gentle touch. The bond of life between them strengthened every day. They depended on each other not just for survival, but for understanding and companionship. One evening as the sun set behind the trees, Talon held Kale close and looked at the sky. The stars began to appear, tiny points of light in the darkening forest. He whispered softly, "We'll be ready, little one. Together we can face anything." Kale chirped in response, nuzzling him again. The dragon's warmth filled Talon with courage and hope. He realized that this bond was more than care, it was love, trust, and responsibility all in one. He understood that Silvara's decision to let him keep the egg had changed everything. They had survived the queen's judgment. They had survived the forest and its dangers. And now, Talon and Kale were bound for life, sharing a connection that no one else could understand. The forest around them felt alive in a new way. Birds and animals moved quietly, sensing the unusual bond. Even the wind seemed softer, carrying whispers of possibility. Talon knew that the path ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that he was no longer alone. Kale chirped again, looking up at him with bright eyes. Talon smiled and stroked the dragon's small scales. "We'll be okay," he said. "I promise." As night fell, Talon built a small fire near their shelter. Kale nestled beside him, feeling safe and warm. Talon watched the flames, thinking of the village that awaited him and the journey that lay ahead. He felt ready, stronger than he had ever been, because he was no longer just a boy. He was a protector, a friend, and a guardian of life. The bond of life between Talon and Kale was complete. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and the watchful eyes of the Dragon Queen. And now, as the stars shone above, Talon understood that this bond was not temporary. It was the beginning of something new, a connection that could change the future for humans and dragons alike. He whispered to Kale one last time before sleep claimed them both. "We'll face the world together, little one. You and I, we are stronger together." Kale chirped softly in agreement, and the forest held its breath, watching the bond of life grow stronger with every passing moment. Talon woke before dawn, the cold air biting at his skin. Kale stirred beside him, small wings twitching in the early light. The little dragon had grown quickly since hatching, his silver scales gleaming even in the dim morning. Talon smiled and stroked Kale gently. "We have a long journey today," he whispered. The boy knew that protecting Kale would not be easy. The forest was full of dangers, and he had already learned that courage alone would not be enough. He needed wisdom, speed, and patience. They set out carefully, moving through the underbrush, keeping low to avoid being seen. Talon's heart pounded with every crack of a twig beneath his feet. Kale clung close to him, chirping softly, sensing his anxiety. The bond between them had grown strong, but danger was never far away. The first challenge came quickly. A group of rogue hunters appeared on a nearby ridge, armed with strange weapons that glowed with energy. Talon froze. If they saw Kale, they would not hesitate to take him, thinking of the dragon as a prize or a weapon. Talon crouched, shielding Kale behind him. He whispered softly to the dragon, "Stay quiet, don't move." Kale pressed his small body against him, eyes wide but calm. The hunters scanned the forest below. Talon could feel their attention moving dangerously close. He knew they could not outrun the humans, they were too fast. So he did the only thing he could. He stayed perfectly still, blending into the shadows. Kale mirrored him, small wings tucked in, breathing softly. Minutes stretched like hours. The hunter's eyes passed over them, and then, slowly, they moved on. Talon exhaled quietly. The test had begun, and they had survived the first trial. As the day grew hotter, Talon led Kale through dense thickets and across shallow streams. Every step required caution. He knew that a single mistake could be fatal for the small dragon. They had to navigate not only predators but unstable terrain, cliffs, rocky ridges, and sudden drops. Each obstacle tested his courage, his attention, and his care for Kale. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the forest. Talon's heart jumped. From a clearing ahead, a wild predator emerged, a massive lizard-like creature with sharp claws and jagged teeth. It had smelled Kale. The dragon hissed in fear and tried to hide behind Talon. The boy had no weapon, no way to fight it directly. But he remembered the queen's lessons, courage and respect. He stepped forward slowly, keeping his eyes on the creature. "Go away," he whispered, not in anger but with confidence. The predator paused, sensing something unusual in the boy's voice. Kale hissed beside him, small flames flickering from his mouth instinctively. The predator growled but hesitated. Talon held his ground, his heart pounding. Slowly, the creature turned and disappeared back into the forest. Talon knelt beside Kale, trembling. "You see," he whispered. "Courage can be quiet, not just loud." Their journey continued. Talon discovered that the forest itself seemed to test them. Rivers shifted, rocks tumbled underfoot, and sudden storms threatened to wash them away. He learned to trust Kale's instincts as well. The small dragon would chirp, flick his tail, or nuzzle him to signal danger. Talon relied on these cues, and together they navigated the perils of the wild. One evening, as they rested near a cliff overlooking the valley below, Talon noticed movement in the distance. Another group of humans, this time from his village, searching for him. He realized they might take Kale, not understanding the bond he had formed. Talon felt fear, but he knew he had to act. Courage was not just facing monsters, it was making difficult decisions to protect those you loved. He whispered to Kale, "We must hide. Stay close." They slipped through the trees, moving silently, guided by Kale's instincts and Talon's careful observation. Every shadow, every sound mattered. The humans passed without seeing them. Talon's heart still raced, but he smiled quietly. They had survived another test. As night fell, Talon built a small shelter from branches and leaves. Kale curled beside him, tiny wings folding neatly. Talon watched the stars appear, reflecting in the dragon's bright eyes. He realized that every challenge they had faced together had strengthened their bond. They had learned to trust each other completely. The tests of courage were not just physical, they were mental, emotional, and spiritual. Over the next few days, Talon and Kale faced more trials. They crossed narrow ledges over rushing rivers, avoided hunting predators, and navigated forests filled with unseen dangers. Each time, Talon had to stay calm, think carefully, and act with courage. Kale's instincts guided him, and Talon learned to listen, not just act. Together they became a single unit, boy and dragon learning from each other. At one point they encountered a deep chasm, too wide to jump. Talon looked at Kale and the dragon chirped, sensing the problem. The The boy realized he had to build a makeshift bridge from fallen branches. It was risky and the wind made it sway, but he moved carefully, holding Kale securely. Step by step they crossed. Talon's hands shook, but Kale chirped encouragingly. They made it across safely, their courage tested and proven once again. Finally, after many days of travel, Talon and Kale reached a high plateau overlooking their village. The boy looked down at the small homes, the fields, and the people he had risked everything to protect. He realized that the journey had changed him. He was no longer just a scared boy. He was a protector, a guardian of life, and a companion to a dragon. Kale chirped as if sensing Talon's thoughts. The bond they had formed was unbreakable. Every test of courage, every danger they faced had brought them closer. Talon knew the challenges were far from over, but he felt ready. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear, it was acting in spite of it for something greater than oneself. As the sun set, painting the sky in red and gold, Talon held Kale close. "We did it," he whispered. "We survived. And we will face whatever comes next, together." Kale chirped softly, nuzzling him. The bond between boy and dragon had been tested and proven strong. They were ready for the next part of their journey, stronger than before and bound by courage, trust, and the shared will to protect life. In the quiet of the evening, with the wind rustling through the trees and the stars beginning to shine, Talon and Kale rested. They had faced every danger the forest and the world could throw at them, and they had survived. Their courage had been tested, and passed. And together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing they could rely on each other completely. Talon stood at the edge of the cliff, the wind blowing through his hair and rustling Kale's silver scales. The little dragon had grown stronger and larger than he had ever imagined, his wings now capable of small flaps that lifted him just above the ground. Talon smiled as Kale chirped happily, nuzzling his cheek. The bond between them had only deepened over the months of struggle, trust, and adventure. They had survived dangers, learned from each other, and now they were ready for something greater, a future that could change the relationship between humans and dragons forever. Below them, Talon could see the village where he had grown up. Smoke rose from chimneys, and people moved about their daily routines, unaware of the journey Talon and Kale had undertaken. He knew that many in the village feared dragons, believing them to be dangerous and wild. But Talon had learned something different. Dragons were intelligent, capable of emotion, and deserving of respect. He had seen it in Silvara's eyes, and he had felt it in Kale's small but fierce heart. Talon turned to Kale, speaking softly. "We need to show them, little one. They need to see that dragons are not just creatures to fear, they can be friends, guardians, partners." Kale chirped in response, hopping onto Talon's shoulder, his tiny claws gripping him gently. The next morning, Talon made his way into the village. At first, people ran or hid when they saw him approaching with Kale. They whispered and pointed, terrified of what they didn't understand. Talon held Kale close, showing the dragon's gentle nature. "He won't hurt you," he called out. "He's my friend and he wants to help." A few villagers stepped forward cautiously. They had seen Talon before, a brave but small boy, now stronger and wiser. Kale chirped and lowered his head, allowing a child to touch his scales. The villagers gasped, astonished at the gentleness of the dragon. Talon smiled, realizing that fear could be replaced with understanding if given the chance. Over the following days, Talon and Kale worked to teach the village about dragons. Talon shared stories of Silvara, of the Queen's wisdom, and of how dragons could be allies rather than enemies. Kale demonstrated his abilities carefully, showing that his fire could warm, not just destroy. Together, they helped rebuild damaged barns, guide lost animals, and protect the village from minor threats. Slowly, fear turned into curiosity and curiosity into respect. Word of the boy and his dragon spread beyond the village. Traders, travelers, and scholars came to see the pair, bringing questions, supplies, and gifts. Talon welcomed them all, showing Kale's intelligence and loyalty. He explained that dragons had emotions, memory, and a sense of justice. They were not beasts, they were life, powerful and wise, deserving of friendship and understanding. Meanwhile, in the forest, Silvara watched from a distance. The queen had been wary of humans, but now she observed Talon's actions. He had not betrayed her trust, he had honored it. The bond between human and dragon that she had witnessed in Kale was not a mistake, it was a bridge between worlds. She rumbled softly to herself, knowing that the boy's courage and wisdom were creating a future she had once thought impossible. Talon continued to guide Kale's growth, teaching him how to fly, how to understand human speech, and how to respect boundaries. Kale learned quickly, responding to gestures and commands, but also showing initiative. Together they explored the land around the village, helping those in need and protecting wildlife. The people began to see dragons as partners, not threats. One day, a young dragon, smaller than Kale but eager and curious, appeared near the village. Talon approached cautiously and Kale chirped excitedly. The dragon was alone and frightened. Talon knelt and spoke gently, extending his hand. Slowly the dragon approached, nudging Talon and then Kale. It was the beginning of a new understanding. The bond that had started with Kale could now grow to include others. Humans and dragons could coexist, learn from each other and protect one another. Over time, Talon helped the village build safe spaces for dragons to live alongside humans. They constructed large perches, shelters and feeding areas, ensuring that dragons were cared for while humans remained safe. Kale became a symbol of this new alliance, demonstrating the possibilities of trust and cooperation. Children learned from him, laughing as they watched him mimic small movements, chirp and play gently with them. Talon knew this was only the beginning. The world beyond the village was still full of humans who feared dragons, and dragons who distrusted humans. But he had faith that one pair, himself and Kale, could inspire change. By showing courage, respect, and kindness, they could create a future where both species could thrive together. As the sun set over the village, Talon stood with Kale on a hill, looking out at the horizon. The dragon nuzzled him, wings fluttering gently in the wind. Talon smiled. They had faced danger, uncertainty, and doubt. They had survived together and built trust where none had existed. Now they were ready to lead both humans and dragons toward a shared future. He whispered softly to Kale, "This is our world now. Together we'll make it better. We'll protect it and we'll help others understand. The future is ours to shape." Kale chirped in agreement, flapping his small wings proudly. In that moment, Talon realized that the journey had changed him forever. He was no longer just a boy from a small village, he was a bridge, a protector, and a leader. And Kale was more than a dragon. He was a companion, a guide, and a symbol of what humans and dragons could achieve when they trusted each other. As stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Talon and Kale looked at the horizon, knowing that their story was only the beginning. Together they would face challenges, discover wonders, and teach the world that courage, trust, and understanding could unite even the most different of creatures. The village slept below, safe and peaceful. Dragons flew silently in the distance, learning to trust humans. And on the hill, a boy and his dragon stood side by side, ready to face the new world they had created. A world where humans and dragons could live together, share knowledge, and protect life. Talon hugged Kale close. "We've done it, little one," he whispered. "A new future begins tonight." Kale chirped softly, nuzzling Talon's cheek. Together they watched the stars, knowing that this was not the end, but the start of a journey that would change the world forever. The bond between humans and dragons was no longer a dream, it was real, alive, and full of promise.